morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for receiving the invite from the Access PaySuite team. I'm Wayne Campbell from Access PaySuite. I'm a qualified ISA and PCI. Today, I'm going to quite quickly talk you through PCI DSS version 4.1 and specifically a practical framework called the Prioritized approach. The prioritized approach can simplify how you manage compliance and reduce your risk, starting from the areas that matter the most, rather than the large sets of controls you get with the standards. Here's what we'll cover in the next 15 minutes or so. We'll start with a quick grounding in what PCI DSS actually is, because it's worth making sure we're all speaking the same language. Then we'll look at what's changed in the latest version and why 2026 is a critical year. The core of the session is the prioritized approach. That is broken down into 6 clear milestones that turn a 400-page standard into a manageable step-by-step roadmap. Then we'll shift to the UK regulatory picture, specifically on how the ICO handles card data breaches and the real core consequences for merchants who get their compliance reporting wrong, and you wouldn't be alone if you are in that group. Finally, I'll show you how Access PaySuite can take the heaviest lifting off your plate. So let's get into it. So, PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, at its simplest is a set of security rules that apply to every organization in the world that stores, processes, or transmits payment card data. It doesn't matter if you're a corner shop taking 10 card payments a day, or if you're a national retailer processing millions. If you handle cardholder data, PCI DSS applies to you. The standard itself was created by the PCI Security Standards Council, which was founded by Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discovery, and JCB, card issuers across the world. It sets out technical and operational controls designed to prevent card fraud and data breaches. And here's the key point for any commercial conversation. Compliance is not optional. It's a contractual obligation. Your acquiring bank requires it. The card schemes require it. And if you can't demonstrate compliance, you can face fines, increased transaction costs, and in the worst case, losing the ability to process card payments altogether. To give you a sense of scale, there are 12 core requirement domains with over 500 individual controls, and there are 4 merchant compliance levels. It does get complex, which is why we're looking at the prioritized approach, and this all depends on the transaction volume you run through your organization. It's comprehensive, and that's exactly why this structured approach matters. Now, where are we today? PCI DSS version 4.01 is the current standard. It became the only active version at the start of 2025, and this is the critical point. The new requirements, all of 51 that were previously labelled as future dated or best practice, became mandatory on the 31st of March 2025. So if you or your merchants validated under 4.0 last year and treated those items as optional, the next assessment this time around will flag them as failures. 4 big themes stand out. First, the customized approach. Organizations can now meet security objectives through alternative controls. This is great for a modern infrastructure, but it's not a shortcut. Assessors will scrutinize customized controls rigorously from an audit perspective. Second, enhanced authentication. So password requirements, now minimum 12 character. Expanded multi-factor authentication, and new allowances for phishing resisting or authentication as well. Third, continuous compliance. The days of treating PCI DSS as an annual tick box exercise are over. You need to evidence that These controls are functioning and in place all year round. And fourth, for anybody in e-commerce, or if you have a web presence processing payments, new requirements around script management, specifically 6.4.3 and 11.6.1, will mandate monitoring and authorizing all scripts on payment pages to prevent web-based skimming attacks. And that can be, pretty complicated. So let's talk about why this is hard. The Verizon Payment Security Report found fewer than half, just over 43% of organizations maintain full compliance after their initial validation. That means the majority fall out of compliance at some point during that year. And the standard itself has grown. Compared to version 3.2.1, my favorite version, the Ted Rogers version, there are now an additional 64 updated requirements. The full document runs nearly 400 pages across those 12 domains. For many merchants, particularly mid-market and smaller organizations, the challenge is practical. They don't have a dedicated compliance team. They don't have a CISO. They're running lean operations and focusing on their business. And PCI DSS feels like an enormous overhead that competes with everything else that's on their plate. And that shift to continuous compliance, quarterly scans, ongoing evidence collection, real-time monitoring, and scope creep from third-party providers and cloud service providers who you rely on, you can see why so many organizations struggle. This is precisely the problem the prioritized approach is designed to solve. Instead of trying to tackle everything at once, it gives you a risk-ordered roadmap. Let me show you how that works. Let's move on to the framework itself. The prioritized approach, 6 milestones ordered by risk, designed to get you protecting your cardholder data as quickly as possible while you work towards full compliance. The PCI Security Standards Council developed the prioritized approach by analyzing real-world breaches and gathering input from qualified security assessors and forensic investigators. It maps out every single PCI DSS requirement into one of 6 milestones. The idea itself is simple, but very powerful. Address the highest risk areas, achieve quick wins, demonstrate measurable progress to your acquirer, that's who you report your compliance to, and build your compliance posture incrementally. Milestone 1 is about removing that sensitive data. If you don't store it, it can't be stolen. Milestone 2 secures your network perimeter and ensures you can respond if something goes wrong. Milestone 3 hardens your payment applications. Milestone 4 puts access controls and monitoring in place. Milestone 5 protects any cardholder data you do need to store. And milestone 6 finalizes everything: policies, procedures, training, and scope confirmation. Scope is one of the most important elements of PCI DSS. The little dotted arrow at the bottom, where it says highest risk on the left-hand side, over to completing compliance on the right, systematically leans towards compliance. It's not a shortcut, but what it does is it allows you to meet every requirement, but tells you where to invest your time and money first, based on risk. This is a risk-based approach, reducing that attack surface. Milestone 1 is the single most impactful step you can take. Stop storing sensitive data you don't need. The logic's really straightforward. If sensitive data, CVVs, full magnetic PAN numbers, pins, are not in your environment, then even if you're compromised, the attacker gets nothing of value. The effects of a breach are dramatically reduced. So the first actions are: establish a clear data retention and disposal policy. Never store CVVs or pins after authorization. That's an absolute rule, not a guideline, it's a rule. Mask the PANs where they're visible on receipts and on screen. and render PANs unreadable wherever they are stored using encryption, tokenization, or hashing. A lot of this is quite technical, and I'll come to how we can assist. This is where Access PaySuite becomes directly relevant. If your merchants process payments through our hosted payment page, our AP service, or our SCP service, raw card data never enters your environment at all. Access PaySuite tokenizes it and manages that. That means that your PCI scope basically collapses to the simplest possible SAQ level. SAQs are self-assessment questionnaires for reporting your compliance to your acquirer. If you do that, milestone 1 is essentially addressed by design. This is a really quick win, and we highlight on the right, it's a genuinely transformative action for merchants who are struggling with the overall compliance overhead. Milestone 2 is about securing the perimeter. The points of access, and think of this as a building, are commonly exploited in real-world data breaches. This means installing and properly configuring network security controls, firewalls, network segmentation, wireless security, while denying all of the wireless traffic to the cardholder data environment by default is essential. And crucially, it means you should have an incident response plan that you've actually tested and you have in place, not one that is sitting in a drawer somewhere. If there is a data breach, you as an organization will know exactly what you have to do. Version 4.0.1 requires NSC configurations to be reviewed at least every 6 months. That's the security controls and standards to the environment. And all of the system components have to secure baseline configurations applied consistently. The key message here is that the perimeter security isn't a set and forget exercise. Configurations drift, new systems get added, people make changes. Regular review is what catches the gaps before attackers do. Make sure you're monitoring and checking this all the time whenever there is a business change. Milestone 3 focuses on payment applications, and this is where 4.0.1 made some of its most significant changes. Previously, the standard only required critical and high-risk vulnerabilities to be addressed. Now, all vulnerabilities must be remediated, with the most critical prioritized. Critical patches need to be applied within 1 month of release. So that's to your software, your solutions, your operating systems, your whole IT environment. The big new addition is the inclusion of script management requirements. Control 6.4.3 and Control 11.6.1. If you operate an e-commerce site, you now need to actively monitor, authorize, and maintain every script running on your payments page. This is a direct response to MageCart style attacks, where attackers injected a malicious script onto your website, onto the checkout pages, to skim card details in real time and forward them to the attackers. For many merchants, this is the hardest new requirement to implement. And again, it's an area where using a hosted payment solution significantly reduces the burden, because the payment page scripts are managed by Access PaySuite, not yourselves or the merchant. I've grouped these 3 final milestones together because they build the foundations on what we've already laid. Milestone 4 is access control and monitoring, knowing who's accessing your cardholder data environment, how and why. This includes enforcing multi-factor authentication, assigning you unique user IDs, restricting physical access to an environment, and maintaining a comprehensive audit log. Visibility is everything here. Milestone 5 targets the protection of cardholder data specifically. If your business has determined that it absolutely must store cardholder data or PANs, and you should challenge that assumption. If you do, then this milestone covers encryption at rest, key management, and minimizing what you hold. We can advise on that and securing your environment if you find your business is doing that. Milestone 6 is about completing the picture, finalizing your information security policies, conducting security awareness training for your team, confirming your PCI scope every 12 months, that's requirement 12.5.2, and making sure your third-party service provider responsibilities are clearly documented and contractually agreed. Know your environment, know your partners, know where the data is. Now let's shift gears and talk about the UK regulatory landscape, specifically the Information Commissioner's Office. This is important because many merchants think of PCI DSS as a card scheme issue, something between them and the acquirer. But credit and debit card data is personal data under the UK GDPR. That means a breach involving cardholder data is a data protection breach, and the ICO absolutely has jurisdiction. Look at these numbers. In 2005, the ICO issued a total of £19.6 million in fines. That's a seven-fold increase on 2024. The average fine per enforcement action jumped from 150,000 to over 2.8 million. There were fewer actions, but dramatically heavier penalties. Two cases are very relevant. In Q4 2025, Capita was fined 13.8 million after a breach that affected 6.6 million people. The core failure, a 58-hour delay in quarantining a compromised device, plus missing multi-factor authentication and unpatched vulnerabilities. LastPass was fined 1.2 million for a similar fundamental failure. And here's the key detail. The fine was calculated against the global revenue of its parent holding company, not just the UK subsidiary. The ICO has gained expanded investigatory powers under the UK Data Use and Access Act in 2025. So the message is clear. If you suffer a card data breach, the ICO will look at whether you had adequate technical and organizational measures in place. PCI DSS for compliance, or the lack of it, will be the front and center of that assessment. So let's spell out what that means for merchants who are getting their compliance wrong or not reporting at all. There's four distinct risk categories. First, card scheme fines, so from Visa and MasterCard, monthly penalties ranging from £5,000 to £100,000 on non-compliant merchants. And those fines are passed through by the acquiring bank. Persistent non-compliance can ultimately result in card acceptance being withdrawn. And if your business can't get paid, it will not continue to exist. That's an existential risk for any business that depends on card revenue. Second, ICO enforcement. A breach involves cardholder data triggers and a mandatory notification to the ICO within 72 hours. If your self-assessment questionnaire says you're compliant but investigation reveals you weren't, that's not just negligence, it's a misrepresentation that will be treated as an aggregating factor. You will not be able to defend this. Third, a direct breach liability. Non-compliance merchants bear the full cost of a forensic investigation, card reissuance, customer compensation. For all level 1 merchants, these costs can run into millions. And fourth, reputational damage. Customer trust, once lost, it's gone. It's extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. A publicised breach linked to poor compliance practices damages the brand far beyond an immediate financial cost. And it's always the merchant or the retailer who is highlighted in the news, not the technical IT division in the background. So do your due diligence. This slide is really the heart of the message for anybody responsible for compliance reporting. On the left, the red column, these are the behaviours that create risk: submitting an SAQ that overstates your controls, failing to disclose third-party access to cardholder data, not updating your compliance status after significant changes to your environment, treating PCI DSS as something you do once every year and then forget about, or ignoring the difference between tokenized and non-tokenized card data flows and not understanding where that card data is. On the right, the green column, genuine compliance, accurate, evidence-based SAQ completion, quarterly vulnerability scans, annual penetrations testing, scope reviews every 12 months, and continuous monitoring, clear contractual documentation of third-party responsibilities. The difference between these two columns isn't just compliance, it's the difference between having a defendable position if something goes wrong and being completely exposed and at risk. So how does Access PaySuite fit into all of this? We are a PCI DSS level 1 certified payment service provider. That's the highest level of certification. When merchants process payments through our platform, the heavy lifting's done on our side. Scope reduction is the biggest win. Tokenization in our hosted payment page means cardholder data never touches your system. That reduces them to the simplest self-assessment questionnaire for you to manage, typically SAQA, which is a fraction of the controls they need to manage otherwise. Our payment channels, AP, SCP, Pay.net, a portal, direct debits, all card payment facilities are all built within PCI compliance embedded from design. Merchants are not bolting security on after the fact. It's delivered by design. We also provide compliance support documentation, responsibility matrices that clearly delineate what we manage and what the merchant is responsible for, plus guidance to help they're complete their SAQ documentation accurately. We provide webinars of this type to help inform of updates, and our own compliance is continuous. Ongoing penetration testing, ASV scanning, quarterly reviews, so merchants such as yourself can rely on certification year-round, not just at audit time. So thank you. And to wrap up, PCI DSS does not have to be overwhelming. The prioritized approach, which gives you a clear risk ordered roadmap, and with Access PaySuite handling the payment infrastructure, most of the hardest requirements are addressed before you even start. Please reach out. We can discuss this in further detail. I can point you directly to the prioritized approach documentation and website on the PCI DSS website. Most of the hardest requirements are addressed before you even start. If you'd like to discuss how we can support your merchants or you through your compliance journey, I'm happy to pick this up after the session. Thank you so much for your time. Reach out to the team that contacted you earlier on, and we'll speak to you soon. All the best, and goodbye now.